Welcome everyone back to our life class on February the 23rd, 2025. And I know that I always talk about food, but we just can't help it because, again, we have another cozy fireplace meeting this morning, and we have pumpkin bread homemade by our Julie as we sit together in our group. Again, we have an invitation to those of you all out of state or out of the country to come visit us at Woodmont Christian Church in Nashville. And we have lots of seats for you. So, welcome back to another Sunday morning life class, and again to our opening ritual, where we will begin with paying attention to our breath and where we are, being in our seat, and encouraging you all to a feeling of safety, a feeling of presence. And this morning, even though there are so many ways in which to breathe, I was reminded yesterday of a very simple one that you can take home with you that is so easy to remember. May work for you, it may not, but let's just try it. And it's simply the 3-4-5 breath. And all you do is take a breath in for 3, hold for 4, and slowly exhale for 5. So let's do this together in a series of 3, and you can gently close your eyes if you wish. The main thing is to get very relaxed and in contact with all parts of your chair, your feet firmly on the ground. So let's inhale for a count of 3 together. 1, 2, 3. Hold that breath for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Purse your lips and expel that. Exhale slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's do that again. Inhale for 3. Hold for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, inhale for 3. 1, 2, 3. Hold 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't even get all mine in because I was instructing you all. But I can tell you that I feel clearer. I feel just a little bit better. You notice a subtle difference. Just a little subtle difference, perhaps, in your presence. So that is something that you can take and repeat. You get irritated at the stoplight, at the train coming across, at the person in front of you at the grocery store line that pulls out 1,000 coupons or very shakily tries to write a check and says, I haven't done this in a very long time. Will you remind me? As you have ice cream in your cart slowly melting, whatever it might be. I'd like to, for the second part of our preparation, address the value of stillness and learning how to be quiet and silent with ourselves. I am always reminded of many years that I spent studying the books and words and audio tapes of one of my mentors that I never actually got to meet, but this was so crucial in my own spiritual development. He was professor of philosophy for many years at University of Southern California, Dallas Willard. And this was something that I took this information, practiced this information, and taught classes on here in this very room in the Spiritual Journeys class. And this was based upon the work of Dallas Willard. And this was so instrumental in my own healing journey and in my own trauma recovery, and then in teaching small groups myself on how do you really become a disciple of Jesus. And I have even had a lot of clients who are not believers that are like, how do I become a better person? How do I access my higher self? You can leave the Christian part out because you know I'm agnostic or I'm Jewish. I don't have a problem with it. But how do you live your best life? So I want to give a quote from him this morning because I heard a word from Dallas Willard. This was probably about 15 years ago or so. And he said, our society has fallen victim to something that I call hurry sickness. And I loved that word. And I thought, oh my goodness, I wish that I had had that word when I was a little kid so that I could have said to my family, what's going on with you all? Do you have hurry sickness or what? Everyone was working and working faster all the time. So, in speaking of the joy of silence, and for Sunday, in honoring Sunday, remember how we used to call this the Sabbath, embracing a day of rest. Eugene Peterson describes the Sabbath as a time to receive silence, letting it deepen into gratitude. Dallas Willard says this in speaking of the joy of silence. Silence also brings Sabbath to you. Silence means quietness, freedom from sounds, except the natural ones like breathing, bird songs, and wind and water moving. It also means not talking. Silence completes solitude, for without it, you cannot be alone. You remain subject to the pulls and the pushes of a world that exhausts you and keeps you in bondage, distracting you from God and your own soul. Far from being a mere absence, silence allows the reality of God to stand in the midst of your life. It is like the wind of eternity blowing in your face. Not for nothing does the psalmist say, be still and know that I am God. God does not ordinarily compete for our attention. It is in silence that we come to attend. Amen. So this morning, as you all have been faithfully attending for several Sundays, our new series for this year on reparenting, which basically means reparenting ourselves. We know that even in the healthiest families, there are gaps. None of us gets all the building blocks, foundation blocks that we need in terms of those 12 basic needs that we started on when we have some tapes from the beginning. Last September, you can reference on what those building blocks are. But our parents were not taught how to meet the needs, emotional and practical and spiritual and physical, of us as children. But it's high time that we learned what our own are and what are creative ways that we can begin to reparent ourselves. So I've had people ask me about this series. What in the world does reparenting really mean? And here's how I answer them. It's basically three main jobs. It's providing healthy guidance to those childlike places within. It's providing nurture. And thirdly, setting healthy limits. Like on our limbic brain, we've talked about, we get these impulses and desires. I don't want to, or I want to do whatever I want to do to our limbic brain. And we've talked about the wise cortex being the other part of our brain, being more the adult wise brain, and how it interrelates and saying, no, let's think about this. We can't do everything we want to do, to the limbic brain, and how this conversation has been taking place, right, as we grow up. And it's really helped us to understand how this dialogue goes on inside us all the time. So those three things, providing healthy guidance, providing nurture, and setting healthy limits, are absolutely necessary. And so we have to provide the boundaries and the nurture within ourselves in those areas. Now, what happens in complex trauma is that these things were not taught to us. Perhaps our parents didn't provide that guidance or nurture or boundaries. So when something is not there, when something is not provided, we as children are hurt. And that is the title of today's lesson, H-U-R-T. Just hurt. Just hurt. It's a big category. We've all had it. So what's left today? We look to other people. We look to circumstances. We look to money. We look to expectations. All our life, we look to all of these things. We all have our stories, and we come here today listening to this, and we've expected surely something out there to repair us, right? The problem is, it can't. It hasn't. And we're finally square with ourselves. We have to learn to be with ourselves, with healthy people around us, and the correct tools, and something bigger than ourselves, whatever you want to call that. We have to get the guidance so that we now can learn to live life. We have to learn how to nurture and meet our own needs and set healthy boundaries. Many people have no recognition of this. They would rather just sleepwalk through life. They, as someone told me very clearly last week, I don't want to do that work you're talking about, and I'm not going to do it. And, I'll often get that response. I go, that is fine. There's plenty of people who are willing. And the plenty of people who are willing are those of you who are listening today, or you would not have been listening all this time. So that's what reparenting is all about, providing for yourself the parenting stuff you didn't get when you were a child. So what I want to look at today is reparenting when it comes to the times that we get hurt. Part of parenting children is helping them to know how to deal with resolving hurt, because we're going to get hurt. We are going to get hurt no matter what. That is just life. And in a healthy home, when a child is hurt, their parents will try their best to give them the tools, the guidance, and the nurture so that the child can resolve and can grow from that hurt, so that that hurt doesn't become a trauma or an open wound of some kind. In a healthy home, it becomes a learning situation. In complex trauma, what happens? The child gets hurt, but there's not that guidance or nurture or boundary that they need. So it remains open. It remains unresolved. It's just there. And it becomes a trauma. It becomes a very painful, emotional thing that they can't get rid of. So we pull back on an earlier area of study. Remember the fight, flight, freeze, fawn responses that we talked about? So when we can't get rid of something, that requires us to go to that menu. We can't resolve the thing. The pain is too much. So complex trauma is all about the unresolved hurts and that pattern of responses. But here's the thing, more than that we find in the research and just in life, is that in complex trauma families, there are more hurts inflicted on the child because there's more hurt to deal with, because the families don't have the tools, they don't have the nurture. And when we get hurt, often the family will shame us. If we react with just normal child responses, or we're trying to go to somebody saying I'm hurt, or we cry, The family can shame us for crying, for getting sad, for getting upset, and they can heap more pain on us, on the existing hurt, by heaping shame on, and it can all remain unresolved. So, I was trying to think as I was kind of drafting this along with Tim Fletcher's material for this, that there were lots of little quickisms that my parents learned from workshops when the word boundaries were coming out. And so if we would express that, they would say, well, if someone did that to you, you just need to say, that does not belong to me, which was skipping steps. Or, well, that action belongs to that person. And conversation was over. We're like, oh, we're still dying. There were just things like that were like pop psychology kind of back then as they were experimenting in the 60s, that were completely intellectual but didn't have anything to do with comfort, you see. And so a lot of my work has been totally going back to the fact that I have feelings. These are feelings. It was totally unknown territory to me. And so what I find with most people that I work with is that maybe they grew up in high-performing, totally intellectual families too, and there's this bridge of concrete between your head and your heart. Well, go figure. We grew up during a very unusual period of time and generations before that too. So it's a very painful thing, and commenting on this from a new direction, I hope it'll be instructive for you and give you some insight into yourself. So in most trauma situations, there's that fight or flight response, okay? You all have spent time identifying that in your own histories. When you're too little to fight and when you're too little to flee, then we talk about the freeze response. In some new research, Tim Fletcher points out that it helps us see that there are some other responses. When you get scared and cortisol is released, you have extra energy. When you have that extra energy, fight or flight, the last thing that you want to do in that is sit down and socially engage with anybody, right? Can you think of an experience where you've gone into either fight or flight? Okay. Some stranger that you don't even know. Come here, sweetheart, let's sit down and talk about it. Out of here, or you want to punch them, right? Pretty much. Especially if they're not familiar. So once that cortisol is released, it gives us the energy, and it takes away the desire for social connection at that point. So here's the problem for a child in complex trauma. Here we are, we're really hurting. The people that are hurting me are the people I need to help me. So I can't fight, I can't flight, and I'm too little to deal with it. I don't want to freeze. These are people I know. I don't really want to do that. Maybe there's a way I can get these people who are hurting me to help me because I really need them right now. What if there's a way I can do that? And so what researchers are finding is that there are different strategies that develop to try to get the people who are hurting me to help me. So what's happening is that the child is going against the shutdown of that social interaction. So see, part of me as a child was feeling that fight or flight, and then another part of me is trying to figure out how can I creatively get them to help me even though they're hurting me. You see all that going on inside the kid? So what you're saying is, I don't want you to hurt me, but I need you. So I need to interact with you. Socially, I need to connect with you. That is a lot of energy going on inside a kid. And there's something about that description that If you don't connect with it, don't worry about it at all. Take what you like and leave the rest, as they say, from any of these talks that we make. But there was something about, I could go back to specific occasions as a little bitty child and feel that split and think, oh my gosh, just as a kid? No wonder I don't remember any playtime. That's a lot of manipulating, as we talked about in a talk before, to try to get one's emotional needs met. Not to speak of lack of trust. There's no basis for emotional trust. So there are 3 different defensive adaptations that Tim Fletcher has researched among the different social scientists. We've both read their books. There's 3 different adaptations that come out of the complex trauma where you can't run away, and the very people that are hurting you are the people that you need. So you have to figure out a way to get them to try to help you in the midst of them hurting you. Here's number 1. This is what they call attach or cry for help. So we kind of renamed it attachment, cry for help that comes out of desperation. So I would just call this sort of the desperation cry. This is not just a baby that's crying and saying, I need I need support right now, a normal baby to mommy thing, come help me and change my diaper, I need feeding. It's not just that normal, I need a bit of support, I'm over here struggling just a little bit. This would be a baby or a child crying in panic or crying out in a desperation, like, if you don't help me, I am not going to make it, Or maybe a baby that's separated from the mom for whatever reason, long periods of time, or a mom who's not emotionally available. If you don't help me, I'm not going to survive. Sort of like if the baby could had the thought or had a feeling, it would be like, you're my savior, you are the only one who can help me. If I could walk, I would intrude into your world. I came from your womb. I see you as the only person who can save me right now. So there's this like intensity that comes out of a deep desperation. I'm going to die unless you help me. Okay, so you kind of get the idea that this is not a normal thing. This is like this deep, deep attachment for a particular person. So what I've just described is anxious attachment, but it's very extreme. Okay, this is probably what you would feel that would be like something coming up from the mother. So stop and think about a person that is that desperate. All right, think about that desperate feeling. And I've often thought in my own stories, I've mentioned it to you all, that being separated from my mother at birth for 4 weeks would have given me a great understanding of what that really feels like in adulthood, or if you have adoption situations, whatever that would be like, or if you would have a mother that's just simply too busy to take care of the baby, and the baby would have long periods like that. So if you have someone whose only focus is to get you to save them, I was with someone recently I think her entire family was narcissistic except for this one person. And she had moved and knows no one at all. And she just basically said in so many words, you are the only one who can save me, and this is something that in our field, will happen a lot, over the years. And I just knew that feeling. But it was just so simple and plain and beautiful And that, that was exactly how she felt. She had felt so alone for so many years that not a person on this earth was ever going to understand that, that what that feeling was like. But believe it or not, it can be pretty common. So they aren't being curious about their emotions. They're not curious about why they're feeling the way they're feeling. They're not curious about what they need. They're not curious about what issues are being triggered. They're just in a part of their brain that's totally shut down. And then she said, I don't want to do that work. This one. So see, it's so shut down. This is somebody who just does not want to do that work, but yet they want to survive. So here are some indicators of a person with this attached cry for help adaptation. So like if you go from here into, let's say you're sponsoring someone in a 12-step group, or you are in a volunteer capacity trying to help someone, or you are discipling someone in a relationship. Here's a list of things that Tim Fletcher gives out. If all of a sudden you have someone like that and they get triggered, and I have had people contact me, like all of a sudden this will happen with someone they just meet in a coffee shop or out on a walk in a park, and all of a sudden they run into somebody like this and they've never met somebody like this. All of a sudden they get multiple texts, multiple emails, multiple phone calls. Somebody they've just met a couple of times gets their address, shows up at their house. One lady came into another lady's house and said, I didn't think you'd mind, after all, we know each other. It was like super creepy. Just violating space, don't you have 5 minutes to talk to me? And then starts acting all kinds of extra time, and they're not really a stalker. They're not violent, but it's just that kind of attachment style. What do you do? And it's scary in our times because we don't know where people come from. But let's just say this is an innocent, not a criminal person. Kind of know what you are dealing with. So, you might hear the phrase, I don't like waiting. I want to see you, more than twice a week. I really want to get to know you better. And let's say that you just have kind of an icky, toxic feeling about that person, like they're just trying to fill up time. And this is not just about women. This is about men too. I hear this. So they just keep pushing. Can you give me just 10 more minutes? Can I just call you tonight for a little while? And so what happens is if you don't go along with it, they turn and just lash out. This is very, very common, and it can be in a heartbeat. So they become very childlike, very desperate. So this person has picked you out and idealized you for some reason. This is not just Lifetime television. This just happens all the time. So, what I hear a lot is, well, I just kept thinking I could get him or her to understand. I just kept thinking it would get better. I just kept thinking surely they would hear my no. And so we just have to realize that in our world that we will meet people, that may not be a candidate for our friendly acquaintance little, sit down for coffee list. It's just super tricky. So, I advise my clients to go, okay, do you have a super tricky category on the people that you're kind of talking about spending time with? Do you get an icky feeling around them? When you say no, does that person keep pushing and keep pushing on you and have a pattern? The first thing to recognize is it's going to trigger one of two things. Somebody that just comes into your bubble and demands that you help them. Well, if somebody does that to you, what's the first thing that comes up? you're going to think, hey, bud, that's the last thing I want to do is help you now. I mean, that's a healthy response, right? You're going to feel protective, normal, self preserving anger, right? That's what our instinctual system is about. Or another type of person might have this response, and I see this all the time too. They really need me, and I need to rescue them. I might want to run and drop everything. I don't know. I got to find out what they need me to do. Okay, that's the other extreme. All right. So neither one is healthy. So what you want to be able to figure out with people like this is boundaries, but to understand that as soon as you set a boundary with these people, to them, it just reads out to them like rejection, abandonment. All right? What to you would be just like, okay, taking your day, setting a normal boundary, business as usual, is just some big personal thing. I'll never forget my son, Harrison, who's really, really good with people. And one of the first times he was out of college, he called me, and evidently he'd run into a couple of people like this when he was dating in a new state where he moved, and he said, "Mom, they just took it like some big personal issue. All I said was no." So I informed him about this style of personality. And so if you go rescue, on the other hand, which he did not do, if you go rescue, just get ready to be drained of all of the energy in your soul. You're setting yourself up for a parasitic situation most of the time. And so the reason you're drained is because you're going to be doing their work for them. So if you just rescue them, they're never, ever going to grow up. And they're never going to change. They're going to burn you out. I'm just saying after a demonstrated pattern. And so the longer it goes, the harder it is to extricate yourself. So it's so important to understand, okay, I need boundaries. There's going to be a part of me that might want to rescue them. Do I sense that in myself? All right, I've had some of these talks right here. I've got some tools. Where in the world could that be coming from? So we pause between the stimulus and our urge. Wow. Now, I'm not one to say, of course, it comes from your deep, dark, shadowy closets of childhood. A lot of stuff just is what it is, okay? However, when we get an extreme response like this, it's really good to stop, get with somebody that understands the stuff, and just begin to sort of chase the weed back to the root ball, so to speak. Is it because I just want them to like me? Does that come from my own shame issues? But once you figure it out, it's always important that we respond to people in ways that are warm and loving, but firm. That's why it's important to stay regulated ourselves. Because when you have somebody like this that all of a sudden is totally dysregulated, sometimes you just have to say, you know what? I just need for you to stop and just listen to me. Just listen to me. Look at my eyes. Just listen to me. I know you're in a really hard place. I know you're having a panic attack. And I care for you. I'm going to help you settle down just a little bit. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to abandon you. However, I am not going to do what you are asking me to do. I'm not in a position to give you this extra time. I am not set up to do what you are asking. My life is not working that way. And, you know, I know that you can get through this, but you need something that I cannot give you. Now, it may not be as harsh as all that sounds right now. I'm just trying to give you some little phrases because what they feel is that they desperately can't even get through the next few hours, but you know they can. These are good skills. They will take them somewhere else. These are finely honed skills. That's how it got you in the beginning, right? Right? These are practice skills. So you have to be, it even says in Proverbs in the Bible, be prudent and seek shelter if you get around this. So you have spiritual responsibility to yourself when you sort of get off in the weeds with a person that is like this. They need some kind of professional help, and I always know it's not me. So, that is a very extreme response. It's challenging, but I'm seeing it more and more and more with the stress level in our society and with the disconnectedness of the root system in our society, where people may have no one here. If we get drawn into that drama, it can do a lot of damage to us, and it can do a lot of damage to our other relationships. So that's the first type. The second adaptation is what we call collapse submit. So this is again an extreme trauma response that in life, when life got super abusive or super scary, the child just collapsed. Okay? They didn't fight or flight. Everything just shut down. Just shut down. And again, personal disclosure, I also had a big history with this myself, which was disassociation or just collapse within, just to shut down. So it would be like if things get triggered, just go blank, feel nothing, be totally numb. And sometimes in extreme situations, all muscle strength just collapses. I won't take your time to tell personal stories here on this podcast, but that's exactly how it happens. Your legs totally give weight and you just all muscle collapse. So what happens here is that because of extreme trauma as a child, the cortisol to fight or flight got no benefit. So the brain began to create opioids to numb the pain, endorphins to numb the pain, and what's known as dynorphins took them out of their body and their brain. So it's like an out-of-body experience. It's like just becoming catatonic. And this is something that protected us from pain to prepare us to get hurt. So what happened to them in the past is that the sympathetic, the calming nervous system was taking over, but it didn't protect them. So the parasympathetic, let me go back, correct that. Sympathetic nervous system, which is the hypervigilant nervous system, was taking over. The high alert nervous system was taking over. Okay, you got to watch for danger. But it was not protecting them. So the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calming, the soothing nervous system, said, we're taking over. We're just going to shut you down. We're just going to shut you down. Okay? It said, we can't handle this anymore. We just can't handle this anymore. So if you do a lot of reading or listening to trauma recovery, you'll run into a phrase that there's been a lot of buzz about, and it's called a dorsal vagal state, DORSAL, separate word vagal, VAGAL, dorsal vagal state. There's a lot of controversy and a lot of press about this, but basically a person goes into that state where they just totally shut down. And It's, we call it here, and the second thing, collapse submit, just because of the stresses of life. What I have seen and what Tim Fletcher has seen a lot too, and this is not at all always true, but sometimes treatment-resistant depression, we'll see this in somebody's life. They do everything, and absolutely nothing will work. They're just in there, and they're just completely shut down. The parasympathetic nervous system just shut everything down. They're just kind of like, one person told me, she said, I just became a robot. I felt like a robot. I just mechanically do whatever's expected of me. I became totally compliant. I don't want to cause any trouble. And I've had, several situations, particularly in recall of violence and sexual abuse, where family members were allowed to do that to a person even on into adulthood, where they would just reenact the scene. And it's really not uncommon, unfortunately, but they just go into a catatonic state and reenact this even years later to be a helpless victim. And so the adult carries that into society. It's like domestic violence. Very, very much so. They just become a helpless victim, try to be invisible. They just don't want to be noticed. They just want to fade into the wallpaper. So they go into this collapse submit state, and it makes them where they're not capable of healthy relationships. They're not capable of standing up for themselves. They can't just say, that's not right. You cannot treat me that way. And they won't enter into conflict. They don't do well with crisis in a relationship. It's collapse submit. So if you see somebody who really allows people to abuse them, when they're in collapse submit, they don't want to engage and connect with people and dialogue and be present. They just want out, and they can't engage with intimate relationships. So if you see or have known somebody like this that might have that kind of a history, there's a really good biological reason what's going on in their body, that they would just run, that they would have this kind of a hermit life. That's a possibility. Because isolation and avoiding social contact would be much more meaningful for them and make much more sense to them. Why would they go out and volunteer for the possibility of these things happening? What we'll also see, this isn't very pleasant to talk about, but if they get too severely triggered, you'll see people that just totally stop taking care of themselves, their hygiene, house is a mess. They just feel powerless to do anything about anything, and their house kind of turns into a dump. So again, this is another example of an extreme response to extreme trauma as a child, but it can still get triggered today. So all of that is to speak about people that travel through life unaware, because as soon as anything triggers a sense of danger, they just shut down. So this would be like somebody walking through a rough part of town, and say somebody walks up behind them. So what should trigger a sense of danger and an alert, for this person, instead of running, they would just all of a sudden feel real cold and shut down, and that would put them in a horrible position of getting beaten, robbed, raped, whatever. So if you have, and I do know people like this, or known cases like this, where people just kind of have these horrible things happen, one after another, wrong place, wrong time, not necessarily. Their instinctual systems don't work. So it's very possible that they may have this kind of history. They just start to live this zombie robotic state. So they don't feel pain, but they don't feel pleasure either. Life is just numb. So the third one is known as please and appease. This is Tim Fletcher's teachings. These are his terms for these. And it's not quite so simple. I'm not one to just categorize, but this helps because it helps. I think I can look back at my life as a mixture of all of these at different times as coping mechanisms. So please and appease would be that if the last thing that you want to do, if you're in a traumatic situation, fight or flight, you don't want a little cozy social interaction because you're so hypervigilant. You don't trust somebody to have that with you. Sometimes we bring out this little people-pleasing mode that's called fawning, F-A-W-N. And we go back to the people I should be running from or fighting are the people I need to help me, even though they're hurting me. Are you with me so far? So I have to get them to like me. I have to get them to want to help me. But more than that, I have to be hyper alert to how they're doing. I need them to be happy all the time. I need to be alert to the fact that if they are irritable, even if they get just a little bit annoyed, and of course I think it's with me, or if I can feel anger building, if I can feel the tension or the stress building in the room, then they could lash out and they could ambush me, they could hurt me. So now all my radar is especially trained to how they are doing. It's all about how they are doing. And if I sense that they are starting to dysregulate, my energy leaves my body. It goes into making them happy, fixing their problems for them, taking care of their emotions for them. And because I need them as a parent to be in a regulated state, that is the please and appease. Wow. Anybody else grow up that way? Anybody still having to do that for the people around them? Anybody get triggered with just the right conditions and you go right back there? It's all about awareness of the most powerful person's emotional state. So it's your sympathetic nervous system, instead of fight or flight, becoming a pleaser, putting energy into what is not true connection, but being connected to how you're doing so I can manage your emotions for you. You're saying this to the other person. How are you doing so I can manage your emotions for you? You see what I'm saying? Some people have called this being doubly conscious. This is what I was talking about, the split, being aware of this when I was a child. Conscious for me and conscious for you at the same time, but becoming a whole lot more conscious for you than for me. This is how I lose myself. So you're aware a little bit of your own emotions, but you're a whole lot more aware or conscious of the most powerful person's emotions and whether they're really regulated or not. And you believe with all of your heart that you have to keep them regulated and happy if you are to stay safe. And so the word that I'm not particularly fond of is codependency, but it's the one we've had since the 1970s. I really believe it's more self-esteem, survival based, learning to love ourselves, starting with liking ourselves. Some of those words are a little bit more relevant these days. Whatever you choose. But if we're caught in a relationship like this, we can believe these things. We might believe things like this. Here's what has to happen for me to make this person happy. I have to erase my needs, my desires, and my beliefs. And I have to become aware of your needs, your desires, your beliefs, your thoughts. And those have to become my beliefs, my emotions, my desires, so that I can become a reflection of you. I need to become connected to you in a way that I can be totally aware of how you're doing so I can fix it. Let that sink in a little bit. This is an extreme case, but can you see that there's a certain percentage of that maybe you can see in another person, if not in yourself? The belief is that the best chance of the survivor to survive depends on getting on the good side of the person in power. We are seeing this on our world stage right now in so many ways. And that affects us on many levels, whether we know it or not. But when we look at our individual process, have we ever put all our energy into trying to be super pleasing, super kind, super nice, funny in whatever ways necessary, just so that we would know that we were safe with another person? So here's some indicators of a please and appease type of person. If you're in a relationship with them, they are often giving effusive praise over the top, telling you how wonderful you are all the time, but they're also watching you like a hawk every moment. And then you notice they're trying to anticipate your needs and get things for you before you even ask for them. Then they ask you very personal questions. They want to get to know everything about you, understand you inside and out, and they look for your approval all the time. And they won't share with you a lot of their own stuff because their fear is they might disappoint you if you get to know them too well and find out too much about them. They can't have you disappointed with them, so they limit and control carefully what they share. They only share what you would like to hear. So, having said all of that, how did that affect you? Did any of you say, wow, I see a please, appease in me. I see collapse, submit. Yeah, that makes sense in the light of severe trauma that I had growing up. Maybe I can still get triggered today. Well, possible. It's reflection material. But either way, I hope that the desire to want to reparent ourselves to deal with hurt in a healthy way, or if we grew up in complex trauma when we were hurt, that if we got the responses from our parents like this, just get over it. Come on, how long are you going to cry? Get over it. Or they minimize it. It's not a big deal. Quit making such a big deal out of this. Or maybe they denied it didn't happen. Oh, you're just making that up. Or when deep hurt happens, we feel all alone with it. Hopefully we can begin to reparent ourselves, because when deep hurt does happen to us as human beings, we enter a process of getting over it. And it takes time to get over it. It's not like flipping a switch and getting over it in a second. And guess what? The deeper the hurt, the longer the process. Because what is happening is that our whole brain, all of our emotions are trying to come to terms with the hurt, to resolve the hurt, to figure out what to do about it. there's a process of grieving that hurt. So I hope you know that you have come to a safe place where there's some tools that are available to you and that you can find safe people to talk with about your hurt. Um, there is healing available. You do not have to live with that hurt. Uh, there is great, great power in sharing that in safe spaces and praying with others. So I leave you with this, and hopefully you picked up something of value today. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you again next week.